Broncos demolished. Sean Payton furious as Packers expose Denver's ugly truth before season opener. Broncos Nation, buckle up, because what just went down at Empower Field at Mile High on Friday night was not a preseason tune-up. It was a full-blown 33-13 public execution, and the scariest part isn't even the scoreboard. It's what head coach Sean Payton said walking off that field. No spin, no sugarcoating, no hey, it's just preseason. Payton looked reporters dead in the eye afterward and said flat out that his team's effort wasn't good enough. Not the backups, not the third stringers fighting for a roster spot. He was talking about everybody, starters included, guys who left the field with a lead in the first quarter and then watched their own football team completely fall apart behind them. And when your own head coach is calling out the starters after a preseason game, you know something real is going on beneath the surface. So stick with me, because we're going to break down every single stunning detail from this one. The good, the ugly, and the genuinely alarming. And trust me, there is a lot to get into. But before we dive in, if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button right now. This channel is closing in on a real milestone, and every single one of you watching can help us get there. Hit subscribe, tap that notification bell, and let's get into this Broncos disaster together. Let's start with the part that actually had Broncos Nation buzzing, because for a few electric minutes, this looked like the start of something special. Bo Nix, back on an NFL field for the first time since fracturing his ankle in that gut-wrenching FC divisional round loss to Buffalo back in January. Trotted out for his first live snaps in 7 months. And Broncos fans, if you were holding your breath wondering whether the ankle would hold up, whether the rust would show, whether the guy who nearly dragged this team to a Super Bowl last year still had it, you can exhale, because Nix looked like he never left. He opened with a 5-yard scramble to shake off the cobwebs. Then found Courtland Sutton on an absolutely ridiculous sideline toe tap catch that got overturned on review after Payton burned a challenge, and then on third down, he uncorked a gorgeous 35-yard strike down the seam to newly acquired speedster Jalen Waddle that instantly had the home crowd on its feet. Remember, Denver gave up a first and a third-round draft pick to pry Waddle away from Miami this offseason, and on that one play alone, you could see exactly why. The man caught it in stride and turned on a different gear entirely, the kind of after-the-catch burst that makes defensive coordinators lose sleep. 2 plays later, Nix capped the drive by finding running back RJ Harvey on a beautifully designed wheel route out of the backfield for a 21-yard touchdown, freezing a Green Bay linebacker in his tracks and walking untouched into the end zone. For a moment, Empower Field felt like a playoff atmosphere in the middle of August. Nix would stay in for a second series, help engineer a field goal, and walk away from his preseason debut with a stat line that honestly reads like a highlight reel. 6 completions on 9 attempts for 76 yards and a touchdown. Good for a passer rating pushing 130. Given everything this guy has been through since January, that is about as encouraging a return as Broncos Nation could have dreamed up. And look, if the game had ended right there in the first quarter, we'd be closing this video out with pure celebration. Unfortunately, that opening spark ended up being basically the high point of the entire night, because everything that followed should have every single person in the Denver front office grabbing a notepad. Because the moment Bo Nix and the starters came off the field, this game turned into an absolute horror show for Broncos fans watching at home. Green Bay's offense, even with backups rotating in, started marching up and down that field like Denver's defense simply wasn't there. The Packers finished this game with 299 total yards compared to Denver's 225. And the time of possession battle wasn't remotely close either, with Green Bay controlling the ball for nearly 33 minutes against Denver's roughly 27. That's a defense that spent the majority of the night gasping for air on the sideline, and when your unit can't get off the field on third down, bad things start snowballing fast. And snowball they did. Green Bay scored on 3 straight possessions to close out the first half, starting with backup quarterback Tyler Taylor finding receiver Will Shepard on a short touchdown pass, then tacking on not 1 but 2 more field goals before the break, including a mammoth 59-yarder from Green Bay's kicker that just kept sailing through the uprights like it was nothing. Making matters worse, safety Mark Perry stepped in front of a pass from Denver backup Jarrett Stidham for an interception right before halftime. The kind of gift-wrapped mistake that turns a manageable deficit into a genuine problem. By the time both teams headed to the locker room, Green Bay was up 23-10, and Broncos fans everywhere were left wondering exactly where their defense had gone. This was supposed to be a unit with an identity, a group that hits, that swarms, that makes life miserable for opposing quarterbacks. Instead, across the entire 60 minutes, Denver's defense managed just a single sack while allowing Green Bay's quarterbacks to complete a combined 21 of 34 attempts for 191 yards and 2 touchdowns with 0 interceptions in return. 0. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, Green Bay's defense came up with that one crucial pick and racked up 2 sacks of their own, consistently getting into the backfield and making Denver's offensive line look overwhelmed for long stretches once the starters gave way to the depth chart. Now, before we go any further, I need every single one of you to smash that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more Broncos fans just like you, and breaking this stuff down in detail so you don't have to sit through the whole broadcast is exactly why this channel exists. We're building something real here, and every like, every comment, every subscribe gets us closer to the next milestone. So hit that button, drop a comment telling me what you thought of Friday night. And let's keep rolling through the rest of this breakdown, because it only gets messier from here. In the third quarter, Denver clawed back a little with another field goal to cut the deficit down, and for a brief moment you might have thought there was a real chance to climb back into this thing, but that's exactly where the good vibes ended for good. The fourth quarter belonged entirely to Green Bay. A short rushing touchdown pushed their lead well past reach. And then Green Bay's kicker put the exclamation point on the whole night with yet another field goal to make the final score 33-13. Green Bay's kicking unit alone finished a perfect 4 for 4 on the evening, including makes from 51, 59, 43, and 38 yards, which tells you the margin for error against a team playing that clean in the kicking game basically evaporated the second Denver started beating itself. And speaking of beating themselves, we have got to talk about the penalties, because this is genuinely one of the most concerning numbers in the entire box score heading into roster cutdowns. Denver was flagged around 10 times for close to 80 yards on the night, 10 penalties in a game where the coaching staff was supposedly trying to iron out the little things before week 1 actually counts. Green Bay, by comparison, played a noticeably cleaner game with roughly half as many flags. That is a massive discipline gap, and when you're already losing the field position battle and getting dominated in time of possession, self-inflicted penalties just pour gasoline directly onto the fire. Every holding call, every false start, every questionable pass interference flag extends Green Bay's drives and shrinks Denver's window to answer. Coach Payton himself basically confirmed this after the game, pointing to penalties specifically as one of the areas that hurt Denver's field position the most, alongside the line of scrimmage battle and Green Bay's explosive kick coverage unit. In the regular season, we'd be having a very different, much angrier conversation right now about discipline. In the preseason, the silver lining is that this is exactly the kind of thing coaches can identify on film and correct before it costs the team a real football game. But make no mistake, Broncos Nation, this many flags against a team you're supposedly using as a tune-up opponent is not a good look, and it better get cleaned up fast. Let's also give real credit where it's due, because outside of that electric opening stretch, Bo Nix's overall body of work through his limited snaps was genuinely encouraging, and the concerning part isn't him. It's everyone who took the field after he came off. But zoom out to the rest of Denver's passing attack for the night, and you start to see the cracks. Once Jarrett Stidham trend buried in the entire box score, Denver's ground attack struggled to find any real traction for most of the night, finishing with a modest yards per carry average and 0 rushing touchdowns across the whole game. 0. Meanwhile, Green Bay's backs, even with their own rotating personnel, consistently found room to operate and punched one in on the ground. That gap in rushing efficiency, combined with Denver's inability to finish drives on the ground, is exactly the kind of thing that should have offensive line coaches watching tape deep into the night. You cannot live and die by the pass alone in this league, especially not when half your receiver room is still fighting for roster spots as we speak. And speaking of that roster bubble, this game could not have come at a more pivotal time. With final 53-man roster decisions looming on the horizon, every single snap in a game like this carries real weight for players fighting to stay in the league. Ree Harvey has every reason to feel good about himself after hauling in that touchdown from Nix. A play that absolutely strengthens his case heading into final cuts. Waddle, even on limited targets, showed exactly why Denver traded significant draft capital to bring him in. On the flip side, there are players up and down this roster, particularly along both lines, who did not exactly help themselves with a performance like this. When your team gets physically dominated for large stretches of 60 minutes, surrenders nearly 300 yards to essentially a rotation of backups and depth pieces, and racks up double-digit penalties in the process, that tape gets studied extremely closely by decision makers deciding who deserves a roster spot and who doesn't. This is exactly the kind of game where careers on the bubble either get a boost or take a serious hit, and Broncos Nation, we will be watching those roster cuts extremely closely to see how tonight's performance actually shakes out. Here's the twist that's got the whole fan base talking today though. Sean Payton isn't just filing this one away as preseason noise. Reports out of Denver suggest Payton is so unhappy with what he saw that he's considering leaving his starters in significantly longer next week against the Minnesota Vikings in the preseason finale, potentially all the way into the third quarter, compared to previous years when the starters were pulled early in the second quarter. Think about that for a second. A head coach so frustrated with his team's overall effort that he's willing to risk extra exposure to his most important players in a game that technically doesn't count, just to force a real correction before the regular season opener. That is not the move of a coach who thinks this was just a throwaway exhibition. That is the move of a coach who saw something in this tape that genuinely worried him. Now look, I know what some of you are thinking, and you're right to think it. This is preseason. The final score does not go on Denver's regular season record. Plenty of playoff teams have laid an egg in a meaningless August game before going on to have fantastic seasons. And Denver themselves nearly made a Super Bowl run last year. That context matters, and I am not sitting here telling you to panic like the season is already lost before it even started. But context does not erase the trends, and the trends from Friday night are worth paying real attention to. A defense that could not get off the field once the backups took over. A run game that could not find any traction whatsoever, a penalty problem that needs fixing immediately, and a head coach publicly unimpressed with the overall effort. These are coachable issues, sure, but they are also issues that better show real, visible improvement over the next couple of weeks, because once week 1 rolls around, nobody is going to care that it happened in a preseason at a time. And that brings us to the end of this breakdown, Broncos Nation. But before you go anywhere, I need you to do 3 quick things for me. First, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button right now, because we are so close to a real milestone on this channel, and every single person watching this video can be the one who pushes us over the top. Second, smash that like button, because it genuinely tells the platform to put this content in front of more Broncos fans just like you, and this channel only grows because people like you take those few seconds to support it. And third, drop a comment below with your honest thoughts on Friday night's game, because I read every single one. And I want to know exactly what Broncos Nation is thinking heading into that preseason finale against the Vikings. Turn on that notification bell too, so you never miss a breakdown the moment a game wraps up. We've got roster cut analysis on the way, we've got full coverage of that Vikings finale coming up, and we are going to be tracking every single storyline as this team heads toward week 1. So subscribe, like, comment, and I will see all of you Broncos faithful in the very next one.